Sakti, so, this is Iskir's office. It's kind of a mess. Iskir is usually much more organized than this. Still, I'm not sure what I was expecting considering it's an office that hasn't been used in over half a year. The desk was covered in dozens of books, many of which appeared to be in mid-read. There were several odd artifacts scattered around the room, among other things. Sakti, well, I might as well check out everything I can. Perhaps something in here will give me some sort of clue about the hatchet, or even about what happened to Iskir that night. I suppose I'll start with that bookcase. The bookcase nearby was packed with books and loose papers. It seemed to be somewhat in a state of disarray, as though someone had been aggressively rummaging through it. Sakti examined a few books at random, but most of them were in other languages. The few that were in human language had nothing interesting. The loose papers strewn about the bottom shelves appeared to be writings, again in other languages, but the writings did not belong to Iskir. Sakti, well, that was a waste of time. There was a map on the wall hung to the right of the bookcase. Sakti, it's a map of the planet Frontier. It seems like Iskir was using it for something. There are a bunch of pins marking various locations around the world. It's kind of a strange map. None of the major cities are marked, not to mention these pins seem to be at random locations. The map has a bunch of Iskir's notes all over it. His writing is so prim and proper, it's impossible to mistake. Unfortunately, they're in another language. I can't shake the feeling that this map is important. I had better take it with me. At the very least, I can ask the professor if he knows anything about it, or if he can read this language. Sakti took the map with her. 4 large swords hung on the wall above Iskir's desk caught Sakti's attention. Sakti, these are Iskir's swords. He always said they were strictly ceremonial. I don't think I've ever seen him actually use them. Still, he often carried them around, even when we were just walking around town. Sakti didn't like looking at them. They made her uncomfortable. Sakti, I'm not taking them with me. They look far too heavy for me to easily carry around anyway. There were various strange artifacts around the room in display cases. Sakti, what are these things anyway? Maybe some sort of art? They look like sculptures. Well, whatever they are, they're all in display cases anyway, so I'll probably just leave them. Besides, I can't say I think they even really look all that good as far as art goes. Iskir's tastes always were a bit antiquated. Sakti came around to the main desk and the piles of books scattered around. It was pretty much all that was left to look over. Sakti hovered her hand over the surface of the desk as if a familiar presence emanated from it. Sakti, Iskir. Everywhere I go, I find traces of our memories scattered around. Thoughts of Iskir haunt my every waking moment. I look for him all the places I go, even though I know he couldn't possibly be there. Feels like no matter how hard I try, I can't escape memories of him, even if I wanted to. Sakti set a picture frame on the desk face down. It would probably be better not to take it. Sakti checked the desk drawers and chuckled a bit when she found even more notes stuffed inside. Sakti, Iskir must have been working like mad if he couldn't even have been bothered to organize his notes. Well, I certainly have my work cut out for me. I have all day to try and look through whatever this mess is. Thankfully, most of these books and notes are in human language. Iskir has certain book passages marked. Maybe he was searching for something within these books. As for the notes, there are a lot of them scattered all over the place. They look complicated, but the professor said Iskir had been researching anti-magic weapons, so they might have important clues. Still, there isn't enough time in the day to read through all these. I'll just have to pick and choose. Sakti began to read the books. Sakti, there are 15 gods, one for each element in the canon of magic. These gods, known as the elemental overlords, were supreme beings of pure magic. The book lists off the names of the 15 elemental overlords. Some of the names have notes alongside them. Xzaviaire, overlord of the cosmos, which had a note that read, unknown, last. Tomak, overlord of time, which had a note that read, unknown, possible threat. Siahi, overlord of sound, which had a note that read, unknown, Sakti. Malfil, overlord of darkness. Nara, overlord of light. Nuash, overlord of earth, which had a note that read close. Musul, overlord of metal. Runan, overlord of water, which had a note that read first. Kiran, overlord of heat. Kara, overlord of cold. Arlel, overlord of energy. Vol, overlord of air. Vusus, overlord of bio. Zor, overlord of botany. Salil, overlord of mind, which had a note that read unknown. The elemental overlords, what do they have to do with Iskir's research? And why is my name in Iskir's books? Siahi, overlord of sound, then he writes my name, Sakti, with a question mark. What does that mean? Why would Iskir write my name in a book regarding his research? Sakti continued to read through some of Iskir's notes she had picked out. These are so hard to understand. They're passages in human language, but there are a bunch of words I don't understand. Not to mention notes will jump between human and non-human language at random. There are a bunch of strange sketches and diagrams, but they don't mean anything to me. Perhaps they are magic spell circles? I think I've seen Iskir draw one before. Sakti looked around for anything about the hatchet she had in her possession, but didn't find anything. Sakti, well, I guess that would be too convenient. I should just pick a random passage that's mostly in human language. She read through what little she could make sense of Iskir's notes. Sakti, it sounds like Iskir foresaw some sort of threat? I'm not exactly sure what kind of threat, but it sounds serious. He calls the threat emptiness, something that could endanger his life. This emptiness he writes about sounds like the hatchet. Does that mean this hatchet really is an anti-magic weapon? If so, I still don't know how to reverse the effects. Sakti continued reading through the notes. He writes about theories as to how to combat emptiness. There's a lot of magic jargon here. He theorizes something called a spell of perfect eternity may be able to negate the effects of emptiness. But he hasn't been able to create such a spell for numerous reasons. He mentions collaborating with the researchers here at the university a few times to create this spell of perfect eternity, but with no success. He also mentions contacting a close confidant off-world for help, someone named Harvest on the planet Nexus. Sakti paused her reading. A sudden sadness came over her as what felt like distant memories crept back into her mind. Sakti, the Nexus was Iskir's homeworld. He mentioned he had planned to move back in a few years. I kept pestering him to take me with him, but he always said he would rather I stayed behind. Sakti sat in silence for a moment before she returned to her reading. Her eyes darted through the passages she had just read. Sakti, maybe the spell of perfect eternity he writes about is the answer. He does write that it is a spell meant to counteract emptiness, which is the hatchet, I think. But I can't use magic. If Iskir wasn't able to conjure such a power, there's no way I'd be able to. Wait, here he writes the elemental overlords are the key. What could that mean? Sakti continued to read for several hours. Sakti. Well, it's starting to get late. Not to mention I'm starting to get a headache from all that reading. I'd better head home. I might as well take some of these books and writings with me. I'll stuff as many as I can into my bag. I can read more later and come back if I think I need more. Sakti left Xzaviaire's office and closed the door behind her. The professor from earlier walked toward her. Professor. Oh, I was just about to check up on you. We're about to lock up for the day. You've been in there for quite some time. Did you find anything useful? Sakti. I took a few of his books and notes regarding his research. I don't really get them all that much, but I think they might have the answers I need. I hope you don't mind. Professor. Not at all. Take whatever you need. Sakti. By the way, would you be able to read any of these notes by chance? They're in another language I can't read. Or perhaps you know the significance of any of these locations. Sakti showed the professor the map from Xzaviaire's office with the pins. Professor. Ah, those notes are in an ancient Arencan script. Lord Xzaviaire once said he wrote some of his notes in an ancient language because he was afraid of his research getting stolen. It only ever happened once, a long time ago, but ever since he's been very paranoid about it. I'm afraid the only ones capable of reading such notes would be Lord Xzaviaire or another Arenca. As for those locations marked by those pins, I'm sorry, but nothing immediately comes to mind. Sakti. I see. I know you mentioned Xzaviaire didn't really speak of his work, but why do you think Xzaviaire was researching anti-magic weaponry? Did it have to do with the threat he foresaw? Professor. Threat? I'm not sure he ever said anything about a threat, but now that you mention it, he did say something about needing to start preparing countermeasures for something. I think he said he needed to... what was it? Assemble powers or something? We weren't sure what he meant by that, but he was very adamant about keeping his work to himself for the time being. Still, he was being unusually secretive about the whole thing. He had been acting strange for a while, and his demeanor only got more bizarre after he got back from far away. Sakti. Far away? The port city to the east? What was he doing all the way out there? Professor. He said he needed to go to Faraway to see the lady in the water, whoever that is. Sakti. Xzaviaire mentioned he had to leave the city for a while a few weeks before the attack, but he never said anything about going all the way out to Faraway. I feel like he would have said something if he needed to go all the way out there. One more thing. Did he say anything about the trip? You said he started acting strangely after he got back. What made you think that? Professor. Well, I asked him how his trip went, and he said he was unable to meet the person he went to see, the lady in the water he had mentioned before. He said he had made a mistake, a miscalculation, and was quite distraught. When I asked him as to what he meant and if there was anything we could do to help, he said to pay him no mind and didn't speak of it further, so we didn't ask further questions. Still, the days before he was attacked, Lord Xzaviaire always kept his swords on him. I and the rest of the university staff had never seen him carry them on his person before. He usually just left them in his office. It was quite unsettling to say the least. Why would he carry his swords around all day just to leave them here the night he was attacked? I would think if he were anxious, he would have kept them on him at all times, right? Not to criticize him or anything. These things that happen can't be foreseen. That's why they're called accidents. Still, I just can't help but wonder what if, you know. Sakti, what if, indeed.